No, they got so much evidence against them. Like, when you go through it, you can pretty much just, all right, pick a prison. Where do y'all want to?
1090 Jake wasn't exaggerating. Foolio's killers just got slammed with serious time. But here's where things took a shocking turn. Moments after the judge handed down life sentences, one of the defendants reportedly leaped over the bench and tried to attack him. You heard that Rattan attempted assault on the judge, right there in the courtroom. Now, the case has entered a whole new level of chaos. Sources say the prosecution is even reconsidering the death penalty. Let's break it all down. The courtroom meltdown. The room exploded into pure pandemonium. Screams echoed off the walls. Threats flew. A fist slammed into the judge's bench. It all happened just minutes after the sentencing. Rashad Murphy, the same man prosecutors said once bragged about finally getting revenge, lunged at the judge with a jagged piece of plexiglass. Deputies tackled him before he could land a blow, but the message was clear. This wasn't over. To understand how things got this far, you have to understand who Julio Foolio really was. Born Charles Jones, he didn't just rap about violence, he lived it. He turned tragedy into identity, death into branding. Coming from the rugged north side of Jacksonville, Foolio grew up surrounded by poverty and bloodshed. His father was murdered when he was just a teen. He lost friends in the streets. He watched his own community fracture under the weight of bullets and beef. Foolio wasn't just another rapper, he was a symbol, and his murder didn't just take a life. It cracked open the foundation of Florida's underground rap scene.
Like 15, 15, 16.
What happened with that?
Well, he was in the neighborhood we used to be on called Clyde, and he ended up getting killed.
Foolio once described, in chilling detail, the day a rival tried to execute him in broad daylight, a moment that left his hip shattered, his body dragging across the pavement as he cried out for help. But that trauma didn't scare him, straight hardened him. In Foolio's world, if you didn't carry yourself like the most feared man in the room, you were already a target. So he didn't slow down, he ramped up, he kept rapping, kept naming names, filmed music videos in cemeteries, taunting the families of the very men lost to the same endless cycle of street violence he was caught in. When the viral diss track, Who I Smoke, dropped a melodic mockery, aimed directly at his fallen friends, Foolio didn't retreat. He responded with more threats, more provocation, more reasons for people to want him gone. And on June 23, 2023, they followed through. That night, as Foolio celebrated his birthday, someone tracked him through Tampa, club to club. According to prosecutors, Alicia Andrews, the pregnant woman later convicted alongside her co-defendants, was one of the lookouts. She and Isaiah Chance allegedly used their phones to track his every move. When the shooters closed in, there were no words, no warning, just gunfire. Foolio's murder wasn't random, it was the final scene in a revenge plot years in the making. And just before sentencing, the case took yet another dark turn. A court-appointed psychiatrist revealed that Rashad Murphy had been placed on suicide watch. Guards found a makeshift noose in his cell, along with a handwritten Bible verse about vengeance, and according to investigators, he confided in another inmate, saying he'd rather die than watch that judge smirk at me. The weight of it, all the violence, the legacy, the consequences was closing in.
Said he was suicidal, and he started talking about he want to bring a Bible with him or something. These are all signs that things are going to go very bad.
He wasn't bluffing. The moment the judge read the final sentence, eyewitnesses say Rashad Murphy's face went cold, blank, emotionless. And then, without a word, he launched himself toward the bench, gripping a sharpened piece of plexiglass, fully prepared to slash the judge across the throat. Security tackled him before he could strike, right in front of stunned families, many of whom had just begun to feel the fragile weight of closure. But that sense of closure, it was a lie. This wasn't just one man's rage boiling over. It was the violent collision of viral infamy, unresolved trauma, and a street culture that worships revenge like currency. That's why people in Jacksonville aren't saying it's over. They're saying asterisk, this is just the beginning. Asterisk, and if you think this was some isolated act of madness, think again. As Murphy and the other defendants were dragged from the courtroom, investigators discovered scribbled notes left behind in the holding cell. One of them contained a chilling promise. Asterisk, if this system breaks us, we'll break them back. Not just a threat, more like a manifesto. A glimpse into the next wave of violence that could be coming. According to prosecutors, the entire crew had been coordinating coded messages in the weeks leading up to sentencing, directing their people on the outside to intimidate witnesses and show up in court to stare down Foolio's grieving family. One sealed court filing revealed a message that prosecutors say was a direct threat. Asterisk, they want to see us fold. Let's make them fold first. Court ain't no safe place. Let that sink in. They weren't just expecting chaos, they planned asterisk it. They wanted the sentencing to be a spectacle, a stage, a final act of defiance that would overshadow any sense of justice. And if you followed Jacksonville rap, this shouldn't surprise you. This is the same city where funeral homes have become sets for diss tracks, where memorial murals are defaced for clout, where fallen rivals are reduced to punchlines and viral songs. Foolio knew he was hated, but he never imagined that hatred would survive his death, let alone grow. Now it lives on in courtrooms, in coded threats, in fans and affiliates who treat violence like a tradition. Take Alicia Andrews. The pregnant woman, now infamous as one of the lookouts. After her arrest, she sat down with investigators and admitted to being at the scene, but then she claimed she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. A cry for sympathy? Even as evidence stacked up against her, it doesn't add up. And that's the story here. Contradictions. Because while these defendants publicly begged for mercy, they privately plotted revenge. While their attorneys painted them as misled kids, they smirked in mugshots and whispered about getting even. That contradiction, the performance of remorse, layered over the hunger for payback, is exactly what led to the courtroom attack. One former investigator, speaking anonymously, said it best. It was the most calculated display of contempt for the court I've ever seen. You could feel it the second they walked in, like they were actors in a scene they'd rehearsed over and over. The only question was who would snap first, and snap they did. When Murphy lunged across the bench, it wasn't just an outburst, it was a declaration. We don't respect your courts, we don't fear your prisons, and we'll make you feel our pain even if it kills us. But here's what almost no one wants to confront: the broader failure that let this happen. Because it wasn't just prosecutors who ignored the signs, it was an entire system. Blogs, YouTube channels, influencers, and promoters who amplified this beef for views and engagement. The outrage economy fed the flame. Jacksonville wasn't just dangerous, it was broken. Foolio grew up in a place that offered him no safety, no peace, and no real way out. He survived by embracing the very violence that would eventually kill him, and now, even in death, his story is fueling the next act of destruction.
Okay, when you say it's the worst hood, what does that mean exactly?
Like killings, shootings, prostitution, drugs, like whatever, like anything you don't supposed to see, you gonna see it up.
In the days leading up to sentencing, correctional staff flagged Rashad Murphy as a serious threat to both himself and everyone around him. They recommended extra restraints. They requested a plexiglass barrier around the defense table. They asked for increased deputy presence inside the courtroom, but all of those warnings were ignored. To the state, the show was already over. The killers had been convicted. The headlines had been written, the cameras had moved on, but the danger hadn't. In fact, it was still building. From the moment Foolio's body was identified, his mother began receiving anonymous threats. From the moment the suspects were arrested, their crews started posting cryptic messages online, thinly veiled promises that something worse was coming. In the final weeks before sentencing, courthouse officers intercepted at least 3 attempts to smuggle contraband to the defendants. The warning signs were everywhere. If you want to understand why Foolio's killers believed they could turn a courtroom into a war zone, you have to start with what they were doing behind the scenes. These weren't men preparing to face justice. They were staging a finale, a twisted farewell tour designed to turn them into legends in Jacksonville's violent underground lore. That and nothing reveals that more than the digital trail investigators uncovered. It began with a single iCloud warrant. Prosecutors gained access to Alicia Andrews' cloud storage, and what they found confirmed their worst fears. Foolio hadn't just been killed, he was hunted. According to the indictment, Andrews and Isaiah Chance were in a car tailing Foolio throughout Tampa during his birthday weekend. From the Airbnb he was staying at, to the strip clubs, to the restaurant where he posted his last Instagram story just hours before his death, every location was tracked. Every movement, time-stamped, every detail sent directly to the shooters. Foolio didn't stand a chance. He was a marked man, and his killers were tracking him like prey, preparing for the kill long before a single shot was fired.
They knew everywhere she was at. They knew when they were at the B&B. They knew when they got to Tampa. They knew every club they were at. They never mentioned anything about her being at.
And here's the most chilling part. According to one homicide detective, they knew where he was before he did. They knew the moment he left the club, which exit he used, and exactly which car he was climbing into. While Foolio was out, celebrating his birthday, posting Instagram stories about surviving the chaos of his life, a group of people with nothing left to lose were quietly building a trap around him. A kill box. Every move he made was shadowed by eyes and phones feeding real-time updates to the shooters. But it wasn't just the surveillance that condemned them, it was the digital trail of messages pulled from their phones. Investigators found text after text that painted a picture of chilling premeditation. One message was so disturbing that prosecutors chose to read it aloud in court. When he steps out, we close the curtain. Not if, when, because. To these defendants, Foolio's death wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty, and those texts destroyed any hope of a mistaken identity defense. These weren't random suspects. They documented their own plot in real time, dropping pins, texting progress, and bragging about how smooth the hit was going to be. Even now, some still ask, why? Why would a group of young men and even a pregnant woman throw away their lives for revenge?
We have the home surveillance video of one of the shooters where he's packing his car with the guns.
The answer, as brutal as it is, comes down to one word: revenge. Years before Foolio was ambushed and killed in Tampa, tragedy had already struck the other side. One of the defendants had lost his brother, man known on the streets as Spaz, who was shot and killed in Jacksonville. But what turned pain into hatred wasn't just the loss. It was what came after. Foolio and his crew didn't mourn. They mocked, they rapped about Spaz's death, taunted his family, and in the most shocking act of disrespect, they filmed themselves desecrating his grave. Then they posted it online for the world to see. What was once grief mutated into vengeance. And from that moment on, Foolio's fate was sealed.
Find hand down motive is like, hey, you see your mom crying on the news about someone desecrating your brother's gravesite. And he keeps, and a famous rapper keeps rapping about.
That moment became the origin story for everything that followed, a creation myth for the blood-soaked cycle that spiraled out of control. A veteran journalist who's been covering Jacksonville's rap scene for over a decade put it bluntly: once they desecrated that grave, there was no turning back. That video was like striking a match next to a gas leak. And what makes it all more tragic is this: the state knew revenge was the motive. They acknowledged it in court documents. They mentioned the grave video, but they completely underestimated the depth of the rage it stirred. They saw a case about murder. What they missed was a war that had been waiting for the right moment to explode.
Multiple videos of Julio.
They thought the convictions would bring closure, but instead, it ignited something even more dangerous. Fio's death can't be separated from Youngin Ace, the other heavyweight in this deadly rivalry. The moment Foolio was killed, Ace didn't stay silent. He posted cryptic messages and recorded himself drinking Don Julio tequila, a move many took as a calculated insult. In Jacksonville, where mocking your enemy's corpse is seen as a power move, this was viewed as a twisted victory lap. But the most surreal moment came the day the suspects were arrested. While SWAT teams raided the hideouts, Youngin Ace was sitting in a recorded interview, sipping tequila and casually dodging questions about the feud, as if the bloodshed was just another plot line in a never-ending reality show. Real people were dying, and yet the cameras never stopped rolling.
Hyman is so crazy. You know what I realized? And I realized this while reading the indictment on stream. The moment Youngin Ace was sitting with me for the interview, the cops were raiding the guys.
In the final 72 hours before sentencing, a false sense of calm settled over the courtroom, but behind the scenes, chaos was brewing. Deputies monitoring the defendants uncovered several handwritten notes that signaled danger. One read, asterisk, "They think this is the end. It's just the start." Another warned, asterisk, "Don't let the judge forget he's not untouchable." The most disturbing asterisk, "If I don't walk out that door, no one does." These weren't just empty threats. They were clear signs of a calculated outburst coming. But despite these warnings, authorities failed to heighten security. No extra precautions, no special restraints. Just the same routine presence as any other hearing. It was a disastrous miscalculation. Witnesses say the tension in the room was unbearable. Murphy sat hunched over, gripping a sharpened shard of plexiglass, his breathing loud and ragged like an animal ready to pounce. The moment the judge began reading the sentence, Murphy's expression turned hollow, and then he charged. "Thought he was going to kill him, not hurt him, kill him," one court clerk later said. It took 3 deputies to bring him down, with one having to wrest the weapon from Murphy's clenched hand. The courtroom wasn't a chamber of justice. That morning, it was a battlefield.
They're going to make arrests. Then I was 4 days after. And then it took almost like damn near a month for them to make it.
As chaos erupted in the courtroom, the violence wasn't limited to just one man. Another defendant unleashed a torrent of curses toward the grieving families, seated just feet away, acting as if they were the ones to blame. And even after the room was cleared, Alicia Andrews, the pregnant lookout convicted alongside the others, kept muttering insults at the judge under her breath. But what happened in that courtroom wasn't an isolated breakdown. It was the final chapter in a story that's been written again and again across the modern rap scene. Because this isn't just about personal beef. It's about a culture that rewards the spectacle of death. When Foolio was killed, platforms like YouTube and Instagram lit up with reaction videos, disrespectful memes, celebration of murder, and grotesque breakdowns of the hit weren't just tolerated. They went viral. And when young people realize that mocking the dead brings more fame than their music ever did, they don't stop, they push the line further, until someone ends up in a grave, or lunging at a judge with a weapon in hand. After the attack, officials quickly claimed justice had been done. But anyone who's lived through this cycle knows the truth. There's no real closure, only more fallout.
Are you still facing that RICO, or they drop it on you?
No.
I mean, meaning drop it, mean did they not charge you with it?
Nah, it just went away. Like, it's still up to this day, though. They told me, like, don't get caught with nothing.
For Foolio's family, no prison sentence will bring him back. For the families of his killers, no conviction can undo the damage or shame. And for the city of Jacksonville, no courtroom verdict will put an end to a cycle of bloodshed that has spiraled for generations. Because the truth is, this was never just about one murder. It was about an entire generation shaped by violence, taught that revenge equals respect, and fed by an audience addicted to the spectacle. The story isn't over. Prosecutors have warned that other affiliates are already plotting retaliation. Dozens remain free, some still issuing threats through encrypted apps. According to sealed filings, one of them was overheard saying, "Y'all gonna see more funerals? This ain't done." And after everything that's happened, no one is doubting him. This is the war that won't end. You may think you've heard the story: a rapper gunned down over old beef, a group of reckless killers convicted, a courtroom attack that made national headlines. But the real story is darker, too disturbing for most headlines to admit. Beneath every mugshot and viral video is a tangled web of betrayals, gang ties, and systemic failure that's turned Jacksonville's rap scene into a slow-motion horror film. And at the center of it is a generation raised to believe that fame is earned through violence and respect through blood. Jacksonville has been bleeding long before Foolio or young Ian Ace ever picked up a mic. The city's landscape is stitched together from housing projects and forgotten neighborhoods where underfunded schools and over-policed blocks have created a breeding ground for pain. Hilltop Village Apartments, where Julio grew up, was already infamous in the 90s. Residents still recall a summer so violent that the landlord replaced the leasing office windows with bulletproof glass. By the age of 11, Julio had already watched a woman get shot on the steps of his building. By 15, he was shot himself, ambushed on the way to school over a killing he had nothing to do with. Julio had survived many attempts on his life, but this time, he didn't. And by any objective measure, he never had much of a chance to escape the life he was born into. But that's exactly why his story hit so hard, because he didn't just survive it, he broadcasted it. He turned trauma into content. And in a city hungry for attention, that made him either a hero or a target. The violence didn't end with his death, it intensified. Shootings surged across Jacksonville. Instagram stories carried anonymous threats. Funerals turned into street fights. Teenagers filmed themselves mimicking scenes from Foolio's videos. By the time he was gunned down in Tampa, it didn't feel shocking, it felt inevitable. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. The system didn't just fail to stop this cycle, it helped fuel it for years. Law enforcement painted local rappers as gang leaders in public press conferences, unintentionally boosting their street status. The courts denied bail on minor charges, but rarely blocked the flow of illegal firearms. Prosecutors celebrated big wins, but neglected to fund violence prevention programs that could have saved lives. When Foolio was arrested on gun charges, he recalled the officer telling him, "You think you're hard. We'll see how hard you are when you get shot." He did get shot.
Alicia Andrews, who's the girl who's pregnant, she asked for a speedy trial, but the other three waived.
Right.
Waived that. So yeah, I guess that means she's cooperating.
And when Foolio survived that shooting, he didn't retreat. He doubled down. Because in a world where violence is the only currency for respect, the only fate worse than getting shot is being forgotten. Attention is survival. In the weeks leading up to sentencing, the convicted killers stayed in steady contact. Court records revealed they were sending handwritten messages through friends and affiliates, attending the pre-sentencing hearings, plotting ways to create chaos, to make headlines. One last time, some of the notes debated whether to stage a dramatic courtroom outburst. Others speculated about Alicia Andrews, the pregnant lookout, questioning if she had flipped and started cooperating with the prosecution. Their paranoia wasn't just fear, it was strategy. In their minds, silence meant weakness, and spectacle was power.
Let it happen sooner or later. You never know what God got planned, you know? I told him that a couple times, you know? We be talking time to time, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you never know what can.
One note found in Murphy's jail cell was scrawled on the back of a commissary form. It read, "Asterisk, if she snitches, she's dead. On my mama." Another was more ominous. "This ain't the end. Y'all know what to do." Asterisk from the moment sentencing day began. It was clear the defendants weren't there to hear a verdict. They were there to make a statement. One deputy later testified that Murphy spent the entire morning pacing in his cell, whispering over and over, "Asterisk, this is my show. This is my show." So when the judge finally announced the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, asterisk, Murphy didn't flinch. He lunged. 3 deputies wrestled him to the ground. Alicia Andrews began screaming uncontrollably. Isaiah Shant climbed onto the defense table and yelled, "Asterisk, we run this." Asterisk, it wasn't just a violent outburst, it was theater, a final act, meant to dominate the narrative. Because in that moment, it wasn't about punishment or regret, it was about attention. They didn't care if they died in that courtroom. What mattered was that the cameras were rolling, and the headlines came fast. Asterisk, convicted killers attack judge. Gang members erupt in courtroom. Jacksonville rap war explodes again. But beneath those headlines was something even darker: kids watching these clips on Snapchat, sharing them like trophies, writing captions like "respect" and asterisk, "he's a real one." Asterisk, so here we are. Months later, Foolio is still gone. His killers are locked away. And yet the violence still simmers. Investigators warn that more retaliation is being planned. One informant quoted an affiliate saying, "Asterisk, we're not stopping till we even. Doesn't matter how long it takes." Asterisk, and honestly, no one should doubt them, because the same culture that once boosted Foolio's provocative videos is now celebrating his killer's courtroom chaos. The names change. The headlines change. The cycle stays the same. Maybe the most honest thing Foolio ever said was in that old interview. Asterisk, death don't scare me. What scares me is dying forgotten. Asterisk, he didn't die forgotten. Neither did the men who killed him.
I remember interviewing Julio, man, when he was describing a shootout outside of a studio, he was describing like a movie. Like, to almost a point, I'm like, is he hyping it up? I now get to find out he was just a different type of...
Even now, months after the courtroom erupted in violence, the threats haven't stopped. In fact, they're multiplying. Nearly every week, new warnings surface. Some are anonymous Telegram posts, others are grainy videos showing masked figures, reading ominous manifestos in dimly lit parking lots. A few are even more direct text messages sent to witnesses in the dead of night, whispering the same chilling message: this isn't over. Prosecutors have quietly confirmed that a second wave of sealed indictments is already in motion. Behind closed doors, law enforcement is preparing for the backlash they know is coming once those arrests hit the public eye. They expect chaos not just from the defendants, but from the network of affiliates still walking free, because the legacy Foolio left behind isn't just a mixtape catalog or viral beef videos. It's something far darker, a blueprint, a guide showing just how far young men are willing to go when they feel disrespected, how many lives they'll ruin just to be remembered. Even DJ Academics admitted that Foolio once warned him about the violence building behind the scenes. At the time, Academics thought he was exaggerating. Turns out, Foolio wasn't. He was just telling the truth before it exploded.